Adding images to your sketches can be a lot of fun. If you get tired of using ellipses, circles, begin shape, end shape, and all that kind of stuff, you can use any kind of image that you want. It could be something that you draw and scan in, or it could be an image you've taken or you've created in Photoshop, whatever. Processing accepts PNGs, JPEGs, and GIFs. So for example, here's like a mandala type of image that I did. It has noise on it. And I have an image in here. These are images of books, and this is an image of books outside here. And then it's Bezier's inside here. All right, so let's get started. It's pretty easy to add images. It's just a couple more variables. So the stuff that I have highlighted in blue here, if you go through the PowerPoint, I take you through the steps. These are the three steps to adding this variable that you're going to have. So let's go through the steps. I have my sketch set up here with my basic setup and draw. The very first thing that you have to do is to add the image to your sketch. So I'm going to save my sketch first. It just makes it easier to find it later on. So sorry, I should have probably done this beforehand. And I'll call it images, image practice. Okay, so I've saved my sketch. And to add the image to my sketch, I'm going to go up to Sketch, Add File, and browse for my image. Now, I just went online and I looked for flowers and I got a picture of a flower. So I have a flower here and it's called flower and it has the extension of JPG for JPEG. So you want to make sure that it's called something really simple. If it's not, rename it because you're going to have to type it in and make sure it's perfectly, or it's the exact same. All right, so I know I have this flower image. I'm going to click on it. And now this is in a different folder. It's not in my folder. I'm going to hit open and nothing seemed to happen. But when I go up to sketch, show sketch folder, what processing did was, see, I'm here in my interactive folder, in my folder for this sketch image practice, and it created a new data folder. It created a folder, named it data for me, and it copied and pasted a version of my flower image into it. So you don't have to have processing do that for you. You could create your own data folder and copy and paste your images in there, but you might as well let processing do that for you. So again, I just went up to Sketch, Add File, browsed for my image, and it automatically put it in this sketch folder and put it in a folder called Data. So it's always going to be looking for your images in that data folder. All right, so that was step one. The next step is I have to initialize and declare a variable. So this is not an int or a float or a boolean. It's a new type of variable called pimage. And the I is supposed to be capitalized. So it's not on my PowerPoint here, but probably by the time I put it on Blackboard, I'll make that correction. So pimage space, and then give it a name. It could be flowery images, Bob's pretty images. But you want to give it to something simple. If I was doing the sketch on my own, I would probably call it flower, but for the sake of practice, I'm just going to call it photo, just as an example. So this is what you can call it, whatever. All right, that's step number one. I've initialized my variable as a pimage type and I've declared it as photo. In my setup, and it's important to do this in the setup, I'm going to say what photo equals. So you know how like normally we say like int x equals 10? Well, I'm doing the equals in my setup. And let me just get that in there first, and then I'll explain why we're doing it in our setup. So I have to use the name again of whatever I called my variable. And I'm going to say it equals load image, the I is capitalized, and then in parentheses and in quote, it has to be the exact file name of your image. So mine was called flower and .jpg, end quote, end parentheses, semicolon. Okay, so if yours is a PNG, you have to put .png. If it's a GIF, .gif. If yours is capitalized, whatever. It's just like a web address. It has to be exactly the same. Okay, let me just explain why we're doing this in the setup. because we're asking to load the image. And so we only want it to load the image one time. So it doesn't keep trying to load the image and slow our sketch down. So that's why we initialize and up here, but then we're declaring it. This is what it equals down here in the setup. Okay. And now here in my draw, if I want to be able to see it, so far I don't see my image. If I press play, I don't see anything. Okay, nothing. Okay, I won't see it until I use the second variable, which calls it. So this is kind of like, let's say I made a variable x, but I don't get to see x until I put it in a shape, right? So it's kind of like that. So to see it, I have to use the function image, okay? And then I put, the very first thing I put in is the name of my variable, right? This thing here that I've followed the trail. So that's what goes here, whatever you called it up there. All right, and then I'm going to put in, where do I want it to show up? So up at the corner, you know, or I'll just put it at 200, 200. And now I should see my image. And there it is. Cool. Other things I could do. You can have processing resize your image for you. I'll make it tiny. So this would be my width and my height if I added more. But I just caution you about doing that because it can also slow down your program. So you can do it a little bit, but if it's a big adjustment from like 2000 pixels to 50, do it in Photoshop. All right, but now to make this more exciting, let's make it mouse X and mouse Y. And now we can draw with our image, and that can be actually kind of fun and cool, and you can do some neat things with it. Okay, if I wanted to just get my image to move, so I'll make a variable and use that variable in my shape. And then, so this is just going back to like what we did with a rectangle in the beginning. And now that's going to move across the screen. So all like, basically you can treat this image exactly like a rectangle or an ellipse or anything else that we've done. So you could put in one of your mandalas, for example. Let's just see if I could. Is this a mandala? I think it is. Or something I used as an example. Sure. All right, so I'll just go through the steps quickly here if I wanted to add it to like a mandala, an image. I go to Sketch, Add File, Browse, I'll do my flower again. Okay, and then I have to make my variable up at the top. The image equals, this time I'll call it flower, sure, call it flower. In my setup, flower equals load image, in parentheses and quotes, the exact name, flower.jpg. Oops, this is not spelled correctly. JPEG. Oh, I put an equal sign here. I should not have done that. All right, so flower space, so p image space flower, flower equals JPEG. And now instead of, let's say, a rectangle, or I could, yeah, I'm going to switch this out. And instead of that rectangle, I'll put in image, and then I'm going to put in flower, what I called it, I, and then I guess I'll get rid of, sure. Then I'll keep the I variable and I'll keep my X variable and I'll have it resized down to 50-50. And there's my flower. It's now moving along in my mandala. Okay, so a lot of fun things that you can do, or if nothing else, it could just save you some work of trying to use begin shape, end shape, or just allow you to keep doing what you're doing, but with a new added element. The one last thing I want to give you just as a bit of a heads up warning, sometimes it wants JPEG to be spelled out JPEG. So just check your image extension and see if it is JPEG versus JPG. If you ever misspell this, it's not the exact same spelling as your file, then processing kind of crashes on you. So just make sure you've named this something and that it is for sure in your folder, in a data folder, and it's just the exact same name. All right, and then you shouldn't have any problems.